Okay, I just want to make sure I can go in slideshow and you can still hear us here. Okay, well, let me know if I cut out at any point.
Keep talking, Paul.
Okay, what should I talk about? Current weather in Redmond?
It's raining. It's raining as usual.
Okay, sure. Goats are doing well.
Can you hear us, guys?
Yep, we're hearing you.
Okay.
So it seems like it works when we're in slideshow.
We're going to go ahead and get rolling here because we've got your audio coming in. So
perfect.
Let us bring the table back together, or bring the room back together, and we'll get rolling here.
We're ready.
A couple of years ago, we had Paul Bowden join Mac Admin Slack. He's brought in a whole bunch of folks. One of those folks is Erik Schwiebert, who has not presented to us before. So I want to kind of talk about him just a little bit. He has actually been with Microsoft at least 20 years, if I recall correctly, and has worked that entirety on Office for Mac.
That's correct.
So he's one of the long timers on this. So we're really glad to have him here with us. At this point, Paul Bowden, who's typically responsible for auto update and packaging, anything to do with volume licensing. And then Erik Schwiebert, who is really more about core Office, not necessarily a specific application, but anything that kind of crosses the streams. That's his gig. I want to let them go ahead and introduce themselves, and we're going to see how this works. So Paul, Erik?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Bill. I'll go first. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all again. It's Paul here. So we're Erik and I are sat here in my office, and hopefully you're hearing us. So yeah, I've been around Microsoft for about 20 years now. Not all in the Mac space. I spent many of my years in the Exchange team. And you may notice that my Twitter handle is Mr. Exchange. I guess I haven't bothered renaming that yet. But yeah, for the last several years, I've been working on Office for Mac with awesome people like Schwieb. And yeah, I do a lot of update, installer, manageability, mal work. That tends to be my gig. Over to you, Schwieb.
Hi, everyone. My name is Erik Schwiebert. Most folks call me Schwieb. I have, as Bill said, been at Microsoft for 21 years and change at this point. I actually started prior to the Mac business unit, and I've actually first started as an intern in summer '95, working on Excel years and years ago. And I work on what we call our foundations team. We support kind of the basic infrastructure that all of the apps for Office on the Mac and on iOS devices use and require to boot and get things done. So that's us.
Okay, hopefully my slides are coming through. So we wanted to talk to you about three particular subjects that kind of top on our mind today. So first up, you would have noticed if you're on the Insider Fast channels that we released what we call the 16.x builds probably 6 to 8 weeks ago now. And so this is kind of a big departure from the standard Office 2016 builds that you've seen from us over the past couple of years. And hopefully you've seen some good changes, but you would have also seen some like underlying spooky changes as well. So Schwieb is going to give you the full rundown on what we're doing with this big version change and why we're doing it. And then I'm going to cut back in and I'm going to talk a little bit about the engineering work that's going into Office 2019 for Mac. Yep, you did read that right. There is a 2019 version on the way. So I kind of want to give you a bit of a heads up as to how we're going to coordinate that, what happens to 2016, etc. And then I want to finish up talking about Mal 4.0 and command line support and ultra thin updates. Okay.
So let's start with a little history of Mac Office. The code base is 30 years old. 30 years of market innovation, 30 years of code. We joke inside Microsoft that it's old enough to buy its own alcohol. As a matter of fact, we have people working on the product who are younger than the code itself. So Office started initially as a series of individual apps. Word began on DOS in 1983. We have a lovely picture of Charles Simone here. I'm not entirely sure who else that is with him in the middle there. In 1985, Word moved to the Mac, and Excel actually started on the Mac. The first version of Excel was Macintosh only at the beginning. I love this little picture of Word. You can see that Word had 100% free memory, whatever that means, from January 1985. In 1989, Word made the jump to Windows. It only used I'm not sure how much memory it used, but we had 126K free out of our, maybe 640K. So early versions of Word on Windows, fairly standard, Windows 3 UI. In 1990, we started bundling the apps together. It was a great product. It sold well, but the apps were literally just separate apps on the same set of floppy disks. They didn't actually share any code, or very little code. Post that 1990 release, we thought it would be a good time to rewrite everything. We all know how well this works. So the next version of Word was codenamed Pyramid. It was going to be well architected. It was going to have a common code base for Windows and the Mac. Both platforms were doing well at the time, but it didn't work. As a matter of fact, Pyramid never actually shipped. However, we took a few ideas from that, some of the architecture, single code base to target both platforms, and we shipped Word 6. Word 6 was a great product. It crushed the competition. The red line here is Word for Windows market share over the 80s and 90s, and you can see Word Perfect, the dark blue line, kind of vanishing into the sunset. But Mac Word 6 was not so good. I'm not sure how many of you remember Word 6. It was a pretty abysmal product. And, well, that's what was out there. In Office 97, we actually made the apps share code. They shared a lot of code. As a matter of fact, huge amounts of the code base were rewritten. Every app used a shared set of toolbars, shared set of memory management, and this large, complex product missed its original ship date. When I joined the company as an intern in 1995, I worked on a product called Excel 96, which became Excel 97 when it shipped a year later. And because of that missing ship date, we prioritized, as a company, prioritized the Windows release over what was the beleaguered Mac at the time. And of course, that version had Clippy, which I love. So after we shipped Office 97, the company decided that in order to release a viable product on the Mac that was going to work better than Mac Word 6 or the other Office apps at the time, to split the code bases. We formed the Mac business unit in early 1997, 3 months after I joined the company. The Mac Office source code moved into its own fork, and this release was actually one of the most well-received versions of Office for Mac, certainly at the time and compared to Mac Word 6. In the 10 years that followed, we shipped 3 more versions of Mac Office. 2001 for the Mac, Office V.X a year later that actually had OS X support, Office 2004 for the Mac. But we lost over that time frame many of the benefits of the single code base. We only shared code intermittently and sporadically. If we felt we really needed to port a feature, typically from Windows to the Mac team was responsible for going out, grabbing that code, making it work on the Mac. And so feature sets began to diverge. The object model, the ways that you write macros to drive the apps to do things, those began to differ. And so we ended up with a product where, although they're both called Office, the feature sets were different. What you could do with them was different. And that became somewhat of a problem. This all culminated with Office 2008 for the Mac. We ended up in the midst of a perfect storm of competing requirements. In 2005, about partway through our work on Office, what became Office 2008, Apple announced the Intel processor switch. That brought us a brand new operating system with a brand new chip and a brand new architecture, brand new compiler that was different than what we were using, brand new development IDE, and the requirement that we had to use them. At the same time, Windows Office, in the product that became Windows Office 2007, invented new file formats. These are the OpenXML file formats. And these file formats assumed that every feature that Windows Office had was available and was a first-level piece of data to be read and written in and out of the file formats and displayed to the user. It also came with a brand new layout engine for images, text boxes, charts, all the things you see, and brand new document UI, including the ribbon. So Mac Office had to adopt all the Apple changes in order to even exist. We had to adopt the Intel chipset, we had to adopt the new tools, or we couldn't ship the product. At the same time, we had to adopt all the Windows Office changes to be somewhat compatible. Anybody remember this dialogue? This is all the areas where we discovered file features that we didn't have support for and were unable to deliver in the time frame necessary. So we had to do this at the same time. And so Windows Office 2007 shipped in January of 2007. Mac Office took another full year, lacking VB support, a number of file-based features. This was a problem. This was not sustainable. We were going to have to change. And then the world turned upside down. Apple shipped the iPhone and eventually the iPad. They grew like nothing before. And Microsoft really became, or was no longer, the 800-pound gorilla. And over time, as a company, Microsoft realized that rather than assuming customers would come to us, we had to go to them. We needed to have Office available on the devices that they were choosing to use. So we don't want to repeat the mistakes that we made that led up to Office 2008. So over the last 10 years, and seriously, this has been a long journey, we have begun and worked through a major code shift. We're pretty much undoing the code split that occurred 10 years earlier in 97. We, in that time frame, have continued to ship the suite. We had Office 2011, Office 2016, and now Office 2016 is shipping monthly. There's been a lot of discussion around that, about how to deploy updates. Paul's our expert in that area. But in the midst of this code shift, we have continued to ship the product. But what we're doing and have been doing is slowly and incrementally refactoring all of our code, moving the Mac Office code into the same repository as Windows Office. Different products, different shipping cycles, but in the same repository, so it's easier to share code. More frequently merging code back and forth between the two branches, with the goal of standing up all of our Mac Office code right next to Windows Office. So where are we today? Well, we have shipped Office on several more platforms. We have Office for iPad and iPhone. There's also Office for Android, Office for Windows Immersive. And the reason we're able to do that is because we've made some big core technical changes. What we've done is split the code into what we often liken to a sandwich, where we have a large middle layer. It's our shared common logic. This is where things like Excel's recalc engine or Word's text layout live. Imagine you are the CFO of JP Morgan Chase. If you have some financial model that you want your people to run, and they're going to run it on either a Windows machine or a Mac or an iPad or anything else, they darn well better calculate exactly the same. If you are printing your book or something with Word, you want your text layout ideally to be the same between Windows and Mac. There are some font qualifications that come into play that make that a little more challenging. But this is where this shared common logic lives. And the idea is to make this as big as possible, where it doesn't have dependencies on the operating system, and we can share that logic across platforms, across feature sets, to deliver the product everywhere we want to go with it. We have shared service code that lives somewhat in the cloud, somewhat in various backends. The UI layer needs to be a native experience for the platform we're on. If you're on an iPad or an iPhone or an Android device, touch is everything. If you're on a Mac, we need to be using native Mac controls. It has to look like a Mac. You know, when Steve Jobs talked about Aqua and everything being lickable, 13 years ago, we need to use controls that behave and feel and act natively to the current platform so that users are familiar and ready to go with it. But at the same time, we have this lower level underneath everything that also needs to be platform specific, where we talk to the file system, or we talk to events, or we manage memory, or anything we need to do to support that common logic that is, for the most case, platform agnostic. So we've teased these layers apart. And so the native UX layer is different on the Mac compared to on Android, compared to on iPad, compared to on Windows 32. This is what's primarily different from Macbrained 6. Macbrained 6 had one common UI that was written to a common Windows 32 layer. And when we work on new features, we will likely touch all these layers. Different people will be experts in different layers. So you have Mac experts in our team working on native user experience. We may have someone who is intimately familiar with Excel's recalc engine on all platforms, making changes and improvements such as multi-threaded recalculation for performance and things like that in that shared common logic. And then I work typically at the platform layer. So we've gone through a huge technology shift. What does this mean for you guys, though, for IT admins and the users that you support? To some large degree, it should almost mean nothing, because you know what? We've already done this for Office for the iPad. Believe it or not, 7 months ago, we shipped Office for iPad from that converged code base. The Office for iPad code is the same code base as Office for Android. It is the same code base as Office for Win32. And coming very soon, Office 2016 version 16 for the Mac will be that same shared code base. So we're going to have more common code. This gives us more common features, gives us more object model alignment for making the apps do what you want. But there are a couple of caveats. It's still a work in progress, and we are not promising 100% parity. And by that, I mean, there are cases where there are features that only apply to one operating system or another, or apps like Access that we're not intending to bring to the Mac. But our goal is that for features that do exist, that for the most part, wherever possible, as much of it is common across platforms, but with a native experience and feel. So that's what we've been doing and why it matters. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Paul to talk about feature changes actually coming in Office 2016 and where we're going with 2019.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Schwieb. So it's kind of really interesting how, you know, that shift to bring these two code bases together means kind of very little from your perspective. I know I was talking to a few folks probably about 6 months ago, telling them that, well, we're going to ship the same code as what we have on Win32 Office, and of course, you know, they were immediately worried that the whole UI was going to change and everything was going to look very Windows-like. And so hopefully now, through that kind of sandwich metaphor that Schwieb talked about, you can kind of understand that it really doesn't change an awful lot. However, you know, it is true that the core guts of the Mac Office product have fundamentally kind of changed because of this shift. And, you know, we've seen in the Slack forums that people are saying, well, that the cursor blink rate looks a little different now on that 16 build than it did on 15. And so, you know, we're still working through that. And so there are going to be some fundamental changes that you'll notice. One of the, you know, obviously there has to be like a silver lining for all of this. And so what does it actually get us? First of all, it allows us to really catch up pretty quickly on past feature debt. I think Excel is probably the kind of the biggest example here, where, you know, I talk to large businesses and they tell me that, you know, their finance people try to use Excel on the Mac and, you know, they throw the word toy around. You know, it's just not as powerful as Excel on Windows. And some of that is just because the code is so old. It was forked, you know, many years ago, and it just hasn't evolved. So some features that already work today really well on the Windows version of Office, like real-time typing, co-authoring, real-time document save, multi-threaded recalc in Excel that just makes calc operations so much faster, and even the fairly basic functions like getting proper like pivot charts, table slices, formulas and functions to work well. Just by moving to the 16 build series, we've essentially picked up these features mostly for free. Now, as Schwiebert kind of mentioned, there's work both at the kind of the bottom platform layer and the UX layer to do. So there are many things that we have to do to those two layers to light up, even more features. But the nice thing though is that it's now completely possible to light up those features in an expedient time manner. And as the developers work on new and more immersive features, there's a lot of kind of 3D work going on around here at the moment that we'll be able to bring those features to Office for Mac like really quickly, either at the same time as when they appear on the Office for Windows version, or just within a few months of each other. So it's great that everybody in this building, when we design and we engineer a feature, it has to be designed and engineered for all platforms simultaneously. It's kind of no longer the case where we can just forget about all the other platforms, just ship it on Windows, and then kind of worry about everybody else later. So that puts us in a much better position to bring that much needed parity to all the platforms. And I talked to some other people, and they have this assumption that Microsoft intentionally holds features back from the Mac Office version, that we love the Windows Office product, and we kind of save all of our best features for the Windows platform. And frankly, that's just not true. It's just engineering time that it's taken us in the past to go plagiarize that code from the other fork and bring it over and get it to compile and light it up.
The cost used to be very high to move features around. And with this new change, we're drastically shrinking that cost so that we can deliver them simultaneously or nearly simultaneously.
Yeah. So awesome. Okay, so that's what you'll see as part of the 16x build series. So kind of switching gears a little bit, we're also working on Office 2019 for both PC and Mac here. At Ignite, which was the end of September, there was a product announcement saying that 2019 is coming along, and there hasn't been an awful lot of details about what's in the product, what's it going to look like yet. But we'll share the slides, and I've linked to a couple of blog posts. One thing to be aware of, like how we're working behind the scenes here on how does this upgrade work, and if you're on a subscription, do you just get it? Do you have to go through this kind of conscious upgrade? And so I kind of wanted to shed a bit of light on what's going to happen there. So as you know, the Office 2016 for Mac product today, we call SKUless. It doesn't know until you activate it as to what it is, whether it's subscription or whether it's perpetual volume license product, and what features to show. So obviously, if you're subscription activated, we light up more features for you at runtime, even though all of those features are built into the product. And so 2019, you have to remember, when we use that year moniker, we're really talking about a new perpetual release. And by perpetual, I mean it's, the volume license model. It's, walking into Best Buy and picking up that card and, entering a PIN number. It is kind of the one-off purchase. So many of the features that are subscription only today in Office 2016 for Mac that are not service connected, meaning that they are purely client-side features, will implicitly just, light up in the Office 2019 product. And I think about, the morph transitions with inside PowerPoint. I think of focus mode in Word. So like esoteric features just built with inside the client, those features will make its way into the 2019 perpetual product. Some of the kind of subscription-only features will stay subscription-only. So it's not true to say that, you know, everything that we've released for subscription so far will just get rolled up and, you know, everything will be in 2019. That's not the case. Some subscription will always stay subscription, you know, no matter which year version you purchase there. Because of some changes that we want to make in the operating system support, we're actually going to fork our code base. So in mid next year, we're going to have a branch that we're going to light up for servicing the 2016 product. So, you know, if you're using the 2016 product, you'll continue to get, you know, fixes and security updates and some features. But a lot of our effort is going to be in our kind of our main branch, which is where 2019 will come out of. MAU is going to have some intelligence to know how you're activated, and it will take you down the right upgrade path. So if you are currently a volume license user, MAU will continue to deliver the kind of the 2016 level updates to you. If you're subscription activated, MAU will take you down the other path, and you know, essentially you start picking up the 2019 code base. So for subscription, you'll just see features light up incrementally. There is no kind of big bang 2019. And of course, that's the whole premise of Evergreen and being on subscription and continually receiving feature updates. But I just kind of wanted to let you know that, you know, there is that kind of divergence which takes place as part of our engineering. Okay, so another gear shift. I wanted to talk to you about one of my pet projects, which is MAU 4.0. This has been a long time in the works, a little too long for many people, but we're finally getting there now. So there are two big features coming in MAU 4.0. The first is probably the largest, which is the command line support for detecting and applying updates. And then the second feature is support for what we call ultra-thin updates. And these are like small code patches that we can use for shipping hotfixes and even like new monthly updates at a much lower network cost. So we have just finished up the beta 1 here, and we just, in fact, submitted it for code signing, and then it should be live. So look out for it sometime end of day tomorrow when MAU 4.0 will be live, and I'll be making some announcements in the Slack channel for that. I wanted to show you kind of a couple of screenshots for what the command line looks like for MAU. So our command line tool is called MS Update. This is it running on my machine here, just behind me. So MS Update, there is a command. You can get the current configuration. You can ask it to list updates, and you can install. And of course, you have some arguments as well, where you can say, oh, I just want to kind of update Word today. I want to kind of leave the other apps alone. You can also specify a termination period, so you can kind of give a user, you know, a grace period of time before they will be, you know, forcibly terminated, and, you know, we can upgrade their app. And you can even specify, you know, some message text that will be displayed in a native OS notification that will appear for the user. The other big piece of feedback that we received is for the kind of the output for MS Update. We not only need to just, you know, display friendly messages through standard out, but, you know, we need to support a more kind of programmatic or accessible format. And so we can also output to a plist format. So you can kind of parse it within your own bash scripts or Python and, you know, do some other things with it. And then you can see some examples that we put down at the bottom of the help there as well. So a couple of screenshots here. What does this look like in practice? This is MS Update with the list format. So go check for new updates. And here I'm passing through the modifier of the plist formatter. So you can see that it spits to standard out. It's a standard kind of plist structure of which updates are available and, you know, what the versions are. And then this is a install. This is just a standard text standard out. This is not in the plist format, but this is run in MS Update -I, so you can see that it's detected the updates, and then it just goes ahead, downloads, and installs the updates. The nice thing about this is that MS Update itself is just a very small, thin layer which surrounds the existing auto update daemon and the GUI features. So it's MS Update is not a a standalone drop-in. You can't just deploy MS Update separately because it relies on a lot of the code which exists within inside the the rest of the MAU application bundle. But you can either run MS Update yourself through terminal, or of course you can script it through management tools like Jamf and Farwave and LandRev and Monkey. So we kind of hope that it's going to be just like really useful for IT admins to just be able to have like direct control as to when updates take place. And so coupled with MAU 4.0, we're also going to be releasing ultra-thin update support. This is just a kind of another name for what we call binary-based Delta updates. This screenshot here kind of looks probably like what most of you have seen this week when you ran Office. We previously had 15.39 in last month's build. This Tuesday, we updated to 1540, but this is MAU 4, and what I want to draw your attention to is the size of the updates here. You can see that they are incredibly small compared to what you would normally see in terms of an update. And so this was a 1539 to 1540 update, and we're talking just over about 60 megs worth of packages to do that full update. So how does that kind of stack up with our other update methods? Well, I have like a handy update size comparison chart here. So we have rows which represent each of our individual applications with inside the suite. And then the first column there is the size of a full update. And typically, you would deploy a full update if you were like pushing manually, because it doesn't, have any dependencies on any existing version or old version of that app being installed. So it's a full refresh. And you can see that, the bottom of that column, we're kind of pushing 4 gigs in terms of the sheer size of those individual apps combined. A couple of years ago, we came out with Delta updates, and that's kind of what most people have today. We produced Deltas for the last 3 versions, so if you're relatively up to date, you're only perhaps a couple of months behind or 1 month behind, then MAU will offer a Delta update, and this is going to be much smaller. So this Tuesday, if you were running 1539, you would have been offered a 1540 Delta update, and that would have been, just a shade over 700 megs in size. That's your download across the wire. And if you look at the end column here, you can see the ultra-thin version of the Delta updates. Those weigh in at 63 megs. So we're talking, kind of less than 10% of the total size there. So it's kind of, massive saving. MAU is really the controller. It's the brains behind what is the correct package to download and apply here. So, there are very specific variables that MAU analyzes to figure out what is the best way to get you updated. And sometimes MAU will make the decision that, this machine, it really just can't support a ultra-thin update or a Delta update, and instead I'm just going to offer you a full update because it's safer. And that's the thing here. These update technologies, they are essentially Microsoft invented, and, they don't conform to any, standard APIs or, mechanisms for performing updates. So these are our own optimizations. But of course, we have to be safe. And we would much rather provide you with a larger update and make sure that your apps are completely reliable and continue to boot after you've updated them, rather than, taking a chance and just, arbitrarily applying something that may not work. So the other nice thing about ultra-thin app updates is any hot fixes, just like, a .1 release for Outlook that, we might come out with mid-month. The smallest possible app size is about 3.5 megs. So if we made a single line change inside the source code, which is typically what a hotfix is, then that's the size of the app update. And then ultra-thin works by doing a binary-based diff between source and target, which results in this patch file. And my kind of next slide here, I just wanted to give you like a simplistic overview of how does Delta versus ultra-thin work behind the scenes. So let's talk about Delta first. So imagine there's a 5 meg binary file in our 1539 package. So it's 5 megs in size. In our 1540 package, that same file is 6 megs in size. So it's gone through some changes, it's grown a little, perhaps got some new features. So in the existing Delta world, what would we do? Well, we would send you that whole new 6 megabyte file from the 1540 release, and package it up in a PKG and send it down to you. So for files that haven't changed, of course, you get a save in there because we don't have to ship you files that haven't changed since 1539. The problem with this is that, every binary will implicitly change because it's been recompiled. It's going to have a new build number on it, and so that's what makes up the bulk of those Delta updates. It's shipping you new binaries. How does ultra-thin work? Well, let's go through that same example. 5 meg old file, 6 meg new file. We use a tool which is actually built into Mac OS X called BSDiff, which can perform a binary diff. At the binary level, what are the differences between this old file and the new file? And it will spit out a patch file, a .pat file, which is the binary representation for that diff. So, in a very simplistic way, this is a 1 meg file because it's gone through, 1 meg of changes. And then we put all of those in a PKG, and that is the ultra-thin update. And then when we download it, we then run another tool, which is built into the operating system called BS Patch. And Patch will take that PAT file, and it will update the binary representation of that old file to make it the new representation. Kind of sounds simple, but I kind of always like to throw in the example of the German grammar checker. So I don't know how many of you use the German grammar checker, but it is built into, all of our apps. Word is where you would most use it. And because, of course, we're, universal, it doesn't matter whether you're, always in the States or whether you live over in Asia, you have the German grammar checker built in, and you're going to take a hit every time, we add a new style to that. Well, I was doing some analysis a couple of months ago, and we had added a new style to the German grammar checker, which is 99 megs in size. In the Delta world, that means that we have to ship you a new 99 meg file because of that, fairly minute change. In the ultra-thin world, that binary diff turned out to be 232 bytes in size. So you can now see why those ultra-thin updates are way, way, way and so much smaller than what we have. So the MAU 4.0 beta will be subscribed into ultra-thin updates, so you'll start seeing those immediately. And we'll have some telemetry that we collect on the back end here just to see how well they're working and if people are having a good time with them. And then at the same time as when we release MAU 4.0, then we'll release ultra-thin at the same time. So those are the goodies that we've been working on over the past several months here. And with that, I'd like to open it up for any questions about any of the session, whether it's about the 16x builds or whether it's MAU or Office 2019.
So what I'm going to do is move this chair over, and I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions. Please come up here so that you can speak into the microphone. They can hear you, plus we can hear you, and they can actually see you. It'd be kind of nice because they don't get to see what we see. They've been looking at me like the last 45 minutes. Sorry. So,
and for anybody on the stream, feel free to drop any of your questions into the Macbrained Twin Cities Slack channel as well. We're monitoring there for questions as well.
So there is one question in the Slack channel right now while we wait for folks in the main room. Someone asks if the binary diff measures against an expected checksum to determine success.
Yes, it does. So we have a checksum for the old file and the new file, and when we apply the diff, we then check the checksum and verify that it is still, the same file. Of course, we have to worry about code signatures as well. So it's not just the code signature on the outer app bundle, but within the frameworks, we have to maintain the integrity of the seal. And of course, a lot of the time that is spent us, developing this feature is been actually trying to make it reliable. Which is kind of no mean feat. The other thing that Mao will do is it has a fail-safe option, and if Mao tries to apply a binary update, and things have gone terribly wrong, and the app is in a corrupt or unlaunchable state, Mao will detect that and will immediately repair it for you. The repair, rightly, wrongly, goes through a downloading the full update, because that is that's the safest possible resolution.
Switch back so they can see us instead of screen sharing.
Oh, yeah.
So nobody's stepping up yet. Mike's getting ready to step up, but before I have him ask his question, Paul, you did a really cool demonstration to your management. You kind of told us about it in Slack, where you updated all these different Macs in different states. Can you tell folks what you did and how that worked with the new Mal?
Yeah, sure. So I had there's some training rooms here, and they have like a bunch of Macs in them. And of course, after a training class, there are, the Macs are in various states. Sometimes the apps are launched. Sometimes they're, the machines are in a logged off state where the user is logged off. So, it's just like a regular user environment. You've got a whole bunch of machines that kind of is in like a disarray. You're not too sure, what's going on with them. But Bill and the rest of the Jamf team was kind enough to give me a Jamf Pro cloud instance that I could play around with here. And so I uploaded MS Update, the new Mal 4 package, into Jamf Pro, and I set my profile correctly. I got all the machines enrolled, and I was simply able to, run MS Update and get all of the machines updated to the latest version of Office, even the machines that weren't even logged on with a user account. And that's, pretty much impossible right now, because Mao just so much relies on that user being present to run.
Hi, I've got a question, but first I just wanted to thank you so much for getting this out and engaging on the Slack. It's wonderful getting this feedback and just seeing the progress and seeing what you guys are doing. So thank you very much.
Sure. We're happy to do it.
We'll keep it up.
Yeah, it's awesome. The question is, we've had some good success with caching server. Could you talk a little bit if this is going to leverage on top of that, or if we should perhaps postpone rolling that out and evaluate the ultra-thin updates?
Sure. Yeah. So caching server is definitely kind of useful in two scenarios. The first is where you have you want very strict version control over which builds are in your kind of production ring, because you can essentially coerce Mao to set its like upper limit for which versions it detects. The second reason for deploying a caching server is so that you can just download one instance of the PKGs and have Mao pick it up locally. Mao caching server is still complementary in a MAU 4.0 world. There is kind of no direct overlap. One thing that we are looking at doing in MAU 4.0, this is not in the first beta though, is to be able to specify a version for MAU to deploy. So for that version control scenario, you can tell MAU, we want to be able to add the functionality where you can tell MAU, I know MAU, you've detected 15.40, but I specifically want you to take this user to 15.39. That's the version that is, blessed in my environment, and I want you to get there. Along with that, we are also looking at making MAU smart in terms of rollbacks as well. So if you've had a user that's upgraded to like an insider fast build, and you need to get them back onto a production build. Today, you kind of have to jump through a few hoops and remove their apps, and then you also have to look at the Outlook database version to make sure that it's compatible. But we also want to kind of build that functionality into MAU as well, where you can say to MAU, I know you're on a later version, but I want you to roll back and roll back in a smart and safe way to get this user machine back into line again. So yeah, the kind of the versioning capabilities of the caching server will kind of over time will become less prominent as MAU has this functionality built in. The ultra thin updates, yeah, we really hope that the bandwidth savings there means that you won't need to deploy a caching server, because even though a caching server is lightweight and it runs on Nginx or Apache or IIS, that's still a piece of infrastructure that you need to manage in your environment, right? And we would love to take all of that infra away and just have you completely kind of cloud-based, right, where you just rely on our content delivery network. And so I'm hoping that people who have deployed the caching server, they'll go through that rethought process and perhaps they'll decide, ultra thin actually solves the problem. I don't need the overheads of this caching server anymore.
Wonderful, wonderful. And again, thanks to the whole team and for putting the knowledge base articles and the Mac Admin software site. Really appreciate it.
Sure.
There's another question on the Slack channel. Will OfficeForMac.com be updated with how you're managing the test Macs with Jamf Pro and MS Update MAU 4?
Interesting. Yeah. So one thing I've actually done is I've put together a video that will go on the OfficeForMac.com website tomorrow, and that video actually is a kind of an intro to MS Update, and I walk through various demo examples of what you can do and how it works. But I also actually walked through a Jamf Pro demo as well of the correct way currently thought of as to how you'd use MS Update with Jamf Pro 10. There's hopefully that will kind of give you some insight as to what the current thought and best practices are there. I'm working pretty closely with the Jamf team, especially guys like John Miller, who are working on patch policies there, and hopefully we'll have some kind of more integration features between MS Update and Jamf Pro coming in the near future.
Hello, I'm Karen McElroy.
Hi.
Thank you for the presentation. I work for Minneapolis Public Schools, and I'm curious about the font placement that you've switched where the fonts are residing. And now it's inside the Word application. We have people that are using 1011 machines, 1010 machines, and they have other applications that they use the Microsoft fonts for. And now when they're collaborating with other people with 1012 machines, at least in our environment, they're not seeing the fonts. And so all the work that they're doing is really frustrating them.
Yes.
Is there anything that we should know about the fonts? Can we make them available to other applications?
So there are two things involved here. So the first is, and they're both kind of the legal technical. So the first issue is sandboxing. Because the apps are sandboxed, and because we have built them in a way that they could be deployed through the Mac App Store from Apple. We don't have an installer that puts content in lots of places on your hard drive. The apps themselves are completely standalone, and therefore they have to contain their own copy of the fonts. That's why the fonts are duplicated into all the apps. As for whether you can share them or not, unfortunately, legally, no. Our licensing agreement gives us the rights to distribute the fonts with Office. And it just so happened that the way we distributed them in the past was through a common install point into the /library fonts Microsoft folder. But because we're not installing there anymore, legally you're not supposed to put them anywhere outside of the Office apps.
Oh, now, that's really harsh.
That's,
Sorry.
that's our agreement with whoever authored the fonts. I can't control what you do. All I can tell you is that our agreement says you shouldn't do that.
All right. That puts it in a very dubious position, but thank you very much for the answer.
I apologize for that. We've definitely heard that feedback, and we recognize that some of the fonts, Calibri and others, have become fairly commonly and widely used, particularly because on Windows, they're installed as part of the operating system. That's different on the Mac.
Yeah. I think the Office 2011 download is still available. Which is
not supported anymore.
It's not supported, but it's still you can license it as a free viewer tool, but you may not wish to use the applications. I guess I'll leave it like that.
Greetings. Are there any plans to move other apps into MAU, specifically Microsoft Teams, and even Visual Studio Code?
Sorry, I missed the last part of the question.
Visual Studio Code would be nice to have that in there as well. Both of that's update very weird in my environment.
Yeah. It's a great question. So yeah, a few of our apps have different update models. Teams currently essentially it's an Electron app, and it uses the Squirrel updater because Electron and Squirrel are pretty tightly bound together. And it's kind of like Slack in terms of it's a lot of JavaScript with a thin Objective or a thin Swift core around it. I have been talking pretty closely with the Teams developers, and they've been in my office several times in the past few weeks, and we've been talking about, what is a better way for Teams to update in an enterprise or a managed setting, because they realize that, the current mechanism really isn't conducive because it just, if you're not an admin on the box, it, doesn't work. And MAU is our established update tool that we use from Microsoft for updating, and we invest heavily in it. And so yeah, the Teams folks, they've got some engineering work to do, but they're kind of heads down, and they're doing the right thing right now. I'm not sure as to when they're going to come out with a separate PKG and with full MAU integration, but yeah, absolutely, that is a high priority for them. OneDrive is the other app that people ask about, and there are good reasons why OneDrive cannot be MAU enabled, and it's mainly around the server backend farm that OneDrive talks to. There are different versions, and the client and the server have to be tightly coupled together. And so OneDrive has its own kind of helper mechanism, which is implemented. Actually, I think it works actually pretty well in a managed environment, but it intentionally doesn't use MAU, and there are no plans for MAU integration there. As for the VS products, I haven't had any conversations there, but you kind of reminded me that I should probably go hit up my good friend Miguel and see what he's up to, and see whether he wants to join the MAU party.
Someone just put a question on Slack. Yeah, so question on Slack is, sorry I came in late and missed most of the presentation.
That's
so
okay.
Perhaps you addressed this, but if not, I'd like to ask if Office 2016 for Mac will have better, pretty please, feature and performance parity between Mac and Windows Excel. For the love of Zool.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Not 100%, but much better. Yes.
And I'm sure Bill will make the live stream available on YouTube shortly.
Yes, it will be coming out shortly. That's actually fairly close to what my question was, is just some of the feature parity pieces, especially with handling large file sizes around Microsoft Excel. That's something that we've heard even at these meetups in the past as well.
I don't know of anything specifically targeted at large files. So that said, if you give the 16.x releases a try, and if you encounter bugs or issues with them, please send us feedback. You can do it on email, you can do it on Slack, you can do it on Twitter. Reach out to us, let us know. We will engage and talk to Excel folks.
I think kind of one of the somewhat scary things from an engineering perspective is releasing the 16x builds. We're kind of not too sure what works and what doesn't. It's like,
I work below the apps. If they boot, they work, right?
Right. We found in several cases bugs that have been long-standing issues in the Mac Office apps. They've disappeared simply because we've moved to the shared code base.
Very cool. So because you're seeing me, that means there's no more questions.
Really? That's it?
Well, you guys have answered. I would love to know how many questions you probably answered in Slack over the past, goodness, it'll be, I think, 2 years for both of you coming up in January.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you answered a few questions here. I think you more than answered your fill of questions in Slack. We really greatly appreciate that. I'm going to echo what Mike said a while ago. Thank you very much. And I'm going to see if we get a nice loud round of applause. Maybe you can hear it.
Yeah, we can. Thank you.
Maybe for the next meetup we should get Jeff Calvis here. It would be like the trifecta.
Does everybody know who Jeff is? Outlook. So if you've got questions about Outlook, we've got a lot of heads nodding.
Many yes
so
please
that's
from the
a
audience.
very popular suggestion.
See what we can do.
We'll go ahead and let you go. We've got some swag to give away, and then we'll be calling it a night. We'll probably be heading over to Runyon's for drinks afterwards. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Talk to you later.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Take care.